welcome back to Life Enrichment with Hank Ballinger. Today, I want to go over the difference between good debt and bad debt. I have a lot of people ask me sometime when they hear me talk or when I'm on a video, they'll say, well, what is the difference between good debt and bad debt? And the question generally is, isn't debt debt? You're in debt, you owe for something. No, it is not. The long answer is no. The short answer is no. There is a difference, major difference, between good debt and bad debt. And that's what we want to go over today. Before we get into that, I would like to say again, thanks for all of those who have subscribed to the channel, those who watch. If you can, please hit the like button, subscribe, tell others. Part of us being able to get the news out is you all helping us. Get the news out, tell others. Everybody can be redneck rich. Everybody can build wealth. Everybody can have a better income. Everybody can have a better life. So it's very possible here in America. There are many countries in the world it is not possible. If you ever go to some of these third world countries, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not a possibility for them. No matter how smart they are, no matter how influential, no matter how much money, they are in a position it is not possible for them to build wealth like it is here in America. Anybody can do it here in America. If you do the things, we're going to talk about that a little bit more here today. If you do the things that wealthy people do, you will build wealth, but you do have to do those things. So let's look at this. Again, a lot of people ask the question, isn't debt debt? It's all debt. I owe somebody. I owe some company. I have bought something. I owe, so there's debt. Whether it's a house, a car, doesn't matter. A watch, whatever. I owe, so it's debt. Not at all. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. We have two scenarios here. One here is someone who has a job. On the right side, someone who has a business. The person who has a job, obviously they have income from that job. Now that income from that job, they have some home expenses. They have some liabilities because of that home. Now let's look at the expense. They go to work, maybe they work hard. Maybe you don't work so hard, but maybe you put in a lot of hours. Either way, you derive your income from that job, but that's all the income you have. Now, that home is going to require some of that income, your house payment, your taxes, your insurance, your utilities, your upkeep. That house requires a portion of that income. And if a job is all you had, even if you're a high earner, generally high earners have a bigger house than someone with a lower earned income. So if you have a high income, you generally have a much larger house. So the expenses on that house generally are commensurate to the income. So if you have income, that house is going to require some of that, and those expenses then come out of that income that you had from the job. But let's look at the liability side. Now again, this is the balance sheet. Assets on the left, as always, liabilities on the right. Now you have an expense on that house. Again, some of those expenses are the debt service to the bank, the taxes, the insurance, the garbage, the utilities, the upkeep. That all comes with owning a house, plus the time, which generally most people don't count that. But then cars, you have maybe two cars, you and your wife. You have generally most people have payments on those. You have taxes on those. You have insurance. You have gas you constantly got to put in. You have to get oil changes periodically. And then if anything goes wrong with them, you've got to pay to get that fixed. Every now and then you got to put tires on them. So those things happen with cars. Student loans, you have to pay those back. They are serious about that, and you cannot file for bankruptcy and get out of student loan debts. There's a lot of reasons behind that. Maybe some of these days We'll go over why that is, but you cannot get out of student loan debts. And there are credit card debts. On the average home, lots of credit card debts. Now, a lot of people in America, these top four, they pay for these, or these top three, they pay for those with their income from their job. So their income from their job pays for some of their house stuff and some of their car stuff and maybe the student loan. But a lot of these other things down here on the liability side of the balance sheet come in addition to and go onto a credit card that most people just make minimum payments. So they have groceries, generally put them on the credit card each week. Clothes, maybe they're designer clothes. Maybe they're not, but maybe they're designer clothes. You spend a lot of money on clothes. Sometimes women do, sometimes men do. But clothes, a lot of times for a lot of households in America, goes on a credit card. Rolex watch. Maybe you like that big, nice Rolex watch. You say, hey, all the guys down at the office, maybe you're mid-level management or upper-level management, you say, hey, I've got to have it to fit in, or I've got to have these new golf clubs like all the other golfers have, or maybe you're a woman, you say, hey, I've got to have all the nice dresses, and it's got to be the purse, and it's got to be the necklace, and the earrings, and the shoes, and the bracelets, it's the rings, it's the whole 9 yards. Got to have them. I have to fit in to move up in my job. Maybe, maybe not. Vacations, we got to go on nice vacations because everybody goes, and we need a break. We deserve it. Maybe, maybe not. Motorcycles, we got to have our toys. We got to have our motorcycles, our boats, our jet skis. We got to have all this stuff. This stuff here is what's keeping you broke. It's what's keeping you middle class. If you want to build wealth, you are going to have to learn to do without some of this stuff, maybe a lot of this stuff. Let me show you maybe a better way. If you look, there is one income, one source that has to feed all of this debt. One source, this one job. Maybe you and your wife have a job, but nonetheless, these jobs have to supply for all of this. And all of these, this home, these cars, these student loans, these credit cards, and all this stuff, they keep consuming, but none of them derive an income any more than just your jobs. None of these bring in additional money. And you see what happens to the middle class generally. The poor is not really in here because the poor generally don't have a lot of this stuff. Whatever the poor generally make in a month's time, they spend. They don't have a lot of these other liabilities. But now these liabilities keep the middle class middle class. It doesn't let them build wealth. So these things will keep you middle class. But let's say you wanted to build wealth. Now, again, you're going to have to really cut back or do away with a lot of these, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But let's say you're a businessman. You want to build wealth. So let's look at what business people do that are serious about building wealth. Now, do they have a home? Yes. Do they have some income from their businesses? Yes. Do they have expenses on that home? Yes. But if you read The Millionaire Next Door, most millionaires, when they're getting started, they keep their expenses low, and as their income keeps going up, they keep those expenses low. Generally, the middle class, as their income goes up, so does their expenses, but their expenses generally exceed their income, and anything over and above what they bring in on a check, on their payroll, on their job, they just put on a credit card, and it keeps them always living less. They're spending more than their income. These people generally spend much less than their income. You have to get good at spending less than what your income is. So these people have a lot of income. They have some expenses on their home. They still have, sometimes they have a debt service. Sometimes they don't have a debt service to the bank. Sometimes they don't owe on their home. Their cars, a lot of times wealthy people pay the cars off, even if it's a new car. A lot of times when they buy it, it's paid off. Credit cards, they may have credit cards, but generally they pay those off every month. And instead of owing on these things for 15, 20, 30, 50 years. When they buy groceries, they pay for them. When they buy clothes, they pay for them. When they buy the Rolex watch, if they do, generally they don't, they'll buy an Iron Man or something. It happens. So they'll pay it off. It's $44. Pay for it. Vacations, when they go on them and they come back, it's paid for. Motorcycles, boats, jet skis, if they buy those stuff, which generally when they're starting out, they do not. But if they do, they pay for them. They don't let a lot of stuff build up on the liability side of the balance sheet and cause them to stay poor or middle class. Now here's what they do. They buy maybe some apartments, and those apartments are income producing and brings in more income each month than the expense of those apartments. So even though they've got apartments, they have more income each month. And so that income goes here, and since they were already able to afford their expenses, maybe they started out with a job and eventually went to where all they did was business. So they bought some apartments, which gives them income. Then they bought a single family home, which gave them more income. Maybe they bought a Dollar General store, which gave them more income. Or maybe a restaurant, which gave them income. Or an Airbnb, which gave them more income. Or auto detailing, a small job, which gave them more income. Not a job that they go to, a job that they hire people to do. So all these things, they load up on the asset side of the balance sheet. See, that's the way the wealthy people do it. Now, are they in debt here? Yes, they owe on every one of them. But this debt is income producing. You see, their business is making them money. Here, this person, their job is the only source of income they have, but because their home requires a lot and they're loading up on the liability side of the balance sheet, it keeps them poor or middle class. Here, they load up on the asset side and keep the liability side very small. And a lot of times, especially when wealthy people are starting out, they may have a house payment, but a lot of times it's not as high as this person's house payment because they're wanting something different. They're wanting to build wealth. They're wanting to get out of that. Somebody else controls me. Somebody else dictates a lot of what I do in life, and I take care of that. Now, let's look at this a little bit different light. Remember, all of these things they load up on the asset side of the balance sheet is income. And now all they've got to keep doing is put another one down there, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. Every time they put another business on the asset side of the balance sheet, more income. Then they don't spend it. They keep their expenses low. Maybe they don't even change their standard of living. And they buy another business. And then they keep their standard of living here, and they buy another business. And they buy another business and another one. It just keeps getting bigger, and the delta between the two builds their wealth. That's how they do it. Now let's look at another aspect of this style of living and this style of living. When inflation hits, and inflation will always hit. If you give it 5, 10 years, at some point within that 10-year cycle, inflation will probably hit. Now, for the guy here that's got a job and he's loading up with stuff on the liability side of the balance sheet, let's say here's his income. Now, how is his expense higher than his income? Remember, his income only pays for his house, his cars, maybe his student loans and a few other things, but a lot of times he loads up on his credit cards and he has small monthly payments on 5 credit cards, maybe 6. I've even had people tell me they have 10 credit cards that they pay a monthly payment on. Can you imagine that? 10 credit cards. You're making the bare minimum pay. So this is how their income is here, but their expenses are here. Now, when inflation hits, look at what happens. maybe their income goes up. If you can see this, maybe their income goes up just a little bit. Maybe they change jobs, say, hey, I got to get a better job. Or maybe they get a raise because of inflation. But generally, their income goes up, if at all, slightly. But look at their expense. Their expense went up more because of inflation. So inflation generally hurts the poor and the middle class. But what happens with inflation for the wealthy? Now remember, they loaded up on the asset side of the balance sheet. So here they are before inflation. This is before. They have a high income and their expenses are very low compared to their income. So the expenses are low. Now, when inflation hits, look, now if you can see this, the expenses went up a little bit. Yeah, their water bill may be a little higher. Their debt service to their house probably won't be, even if they have a debt service to the bank. But their water bill may have gone up. Their insurance may have gone up. Their groceries may have gone up. But compared to their income, their expenses went up very little. But look at their income. When inflation hit, their income went up much larger than their expense. Matter of fact, it is now off the chart. That's a good thing. Why did their income go up so much when inflation hit? Because every one of their businesses, as inflation hit and things got higher, so does property. And that's what they have a lot of. They've loaded up on the asset side of the balance sheet, got a lot of property. All that property went up, so the income goes way up, and the expenses compared to their income went up, but not very much. So this group looks at inflation and says, we love inflation. Inflation is a good thing. Inflation is one of the things that keeps the poor and the middle class, the poor and the middle class. And inflation is also, and it's the exact same inflation. They're living in the same country, around the same area, in the same city as these people, and yet this group of people says inflation is a good thing. It helps our income, and though our expenses goes up, they go up very little as compared to how much our income goes up. So you see the difference between bad debt, all the liabilities on the liability side of the balance sheet, and good debt, which is the asset side of the balance sheet. You need to load up on these. You need to load up on businesses. Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I wouldn't do that. On the next video, we're going to show you how to get into good debt. Okay, it's not as hard as you may think. Do you have to be disciplined? Absolutely. Is it going to be rough? If you're used to this lifestyle, it will be tough. You're going to have to change a lot. I kid you not. You will have to change. Not easy. Can you do it? Yes, absolutely. Anybody in America could become wealthy. If you want to become redneck rich, you can do it. But you will need to become very disciplined. Thank you.